J.R.R. Tolkien. He's phenomenal, a very good writer. I adore the universe he created. So, it was only natural that I had to watch Tolkien inspired book when it's released. It's a good movie. Tolkien, the movie, doesn't reflect in as much on the author's journey of writing Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, or the other books associated with Middle-earth. Instead, it reflects on Tolkien's, the writer's growth as a young orphan in 20th century England. Various themes are present throughout: fellowship, comradeship, magic, love, poetry. One thing that kept recurring throughout the movie was this catchphrase, Helheimer. This was a catchphrase that the TCBS, a group of boys Tolkien was close with, used as their motto, their precept, if you will. What is Helheimer, you may ask? Helheimer takes its roots from Norse mythology, where it is believed to be the land where the dead go to. It is the underworld of Norse mythology. For someone to escape Helheimer, they had to die nobly, honorably. But in order for someone to die honorably, there was something else that had to be done, and that was to live honorably. So the TCBS's battle cry for the living, Helheimer, was a reminder for them to live a worthy, honorable life, to do something with their lives, to gather their roses while they could, to carpe diem. Ever since watching Tolkien, Helheimer has become my battle cry for myself. I was born on the day George W. Bush gave his second inaugural address. I was one of the 13 crores, 47 lakh, 21,058 babies born on that day. And I was one of the few babies born deaf and mute on that day. My parents only discovered that I was born deaf when I was a year and 3 months old. When they noticed I wasn't responding to even the chillest sound. If you are my parents' age and lived the middle-class life in 1990s India, you might remember the chill ringtone of the Reliance button phone. I was unfazed by that sound even when the phone rang at full volume placed next to my ear. When my mother noticed this, she wanted to go to my pediatrician to find out whether I had a problem with my hearing. She told my father to drive us to my pediatrician. He refused, saying that there was nothing wrong with me. Finally, after a lot of counseling, my father drove us to the pediatrician, who recommended I do a BERA test. The BERA test determines how well a person can hear. My mother freely comes with a jovial exasperation of how my father was angered with my pediatrician. For what? For recommending the BERA test. However, he relented after a lot of counseling. And then the results arrived. I was born profoundly deaf. My mother grew up in a very close-knit family. She was dropped off to school in a silver sumo, which trudged along the windy Haken Bench of Connaught, packed with girls in braids and boys in silk shorts and shorts, her cousins. After the day at school, the same sumo would come trudging merrily up the hill and pick her and her cousins up from school and drop them off at home. They would then do their homework, eat dinner, and be sent off to bed. It was very rarely that they would be allowed to go over to friends' places or to have friends over. They seldom went to places, even to the local municipal market. Later, she married the first man whose family asked for her hand. My father, on the other hand, was a boy who had grown up too soon alone. He made most of his way in the world on his own. He left his village in the Nilgiri hills for the graduate town of Trichy in the plains to pursue sports as a kid, and later moved to Coimbatore to gain an engineering degree and start his own construction company. For a middle-class couple who had migrated to the city from a quaint town and had very little exposure, learning that their daughter was born deaf felt like a huge blow they had been dealt with. They were devastated. However, my mother's precept has always been move on, and that was exactly what she did. My parents began looking for what to do next. Their journey took them to an ENT center in Coimbatore, where the doctor prescribed hearing aids and speech therapy for me. However, there was one problem. The speech therapist wanted to train me in Tamil. My mother, however, wanted my training to be in English. One of my uncles, who was living in Bangalore, suggested that she try Srila Kothavada Institute for the Deaf in Bangalore. So, my parents took a train to Bangalore to visit Srila Kothavada. I haven't visited Srila Kothavada, but I have gathered that it is a sprawling campus sheltered from the outside world by two things. Its compound walls painted a dull shade of peach, and the silence that pervades the campus and sits heavily on everything. The principal met my mother, and they proceeded into a spacious office with whitewashed walls. There were framed photos proudly hung on the walls of deaf students of the school who were tailors and carpenters. The principal began describing what the school had to offer: free education until standard 12, sign language, trained teachers, etc. She also emphasized on the graduates of the school. This boy, she said with indubitable pride, has become a tailor. This boy has become a carpenter. My mother was dumbstruck. Her daughter, a tailor and carpenter? Was that the fate her daughter was going to be consigned to? However, as my mother and the principal were walking around the campus, the principal told her of the utopia she had wanted for me. It is a quaint school in bustling Madras. It was a school for those born deaf, but sign language was abhorrent to them. Speech was given to students. The school had classes from play school to UKG, after which the child will be mainstream. Then the child will be given the life as normal as any other kid. This was my mother's utopia for me. She acted fast, and on a sweltering June afternoon, she sat in the chocolate salon on the Bluebird on the Intercity, holding a sleeping baby and flanked on either side by her mother and husband. The family's possessions were neatly stored into 5 huge suitcases and tucked under the lowest berth, out of sight and protected from the notorious thieves that ruled the trains. A day was all it took to set up the house and settle in. I started going to school the day after the house was set. The school was a small, 2-story building painted the color of the sky. There was a small playground with 2 wild students and a jungle gym. The founder was a kindly old lady with flabby arms and a rotund stomach. whose son had been born deaf. It was in her pursuit for an education and speech for him that she had discovered the divine method of teaching. She was now repaying God for his goodness by offering free education and speech to the deaf. Now, scientific evidence and research says that those born deaf had to be mute. This is because a person has to be able to hear sound and themselves in order to be able to speak. Because this is inherently impossible for the deaf, they are mute. However, just like the bumblebee who cannot fly because of his body shape, the deaf individual doesn't know he cannot talk. So he tries talking, and because his vocal cords are working perfectly, he is able to talk. That was the precept Barry functioned under. The training was to be intense. My mother had to talk to me. If a word were to enter my memory, it would have to be said 100 times, literally. That meant my mother had to keep on talking to me. She had to make sure I was making eye contact with her and genuinely interested in what she was saying. She had to find new ways of introducing the same object to me. So she kept talking and I kept listening. At 2, I spoke my first word, Appa, then my second, Papi. It was only after 2.5 years that I started broadening my speech. The school placed a great emphasis on reading. Others could get their information by listening to general conversation, the TV and the radio. However, a deaf individual couldn't really do that. Being profoundly deaf meant I could hear nothing without my hearing aids. Nothing, nada. Even with my hearing aids, I had to strain to hear the kind of sound that was being made. This was because my hearing aids simply amplified sound. My cochlear nerves were weak and I couldn't interpret sound very well. My speech was very muffled at that time. Soon, I grew into a 5-year-old kid and graduated Baradaya. Again, my mother bought a children, something that had become a tradition in the 4 years we spent at Chennai. A bag stowed away under the lowest board, flanked on either side by an inquisitive child and a sleeping old woman. My father sat next to me. Now, my mother had given me speech. She had given me the thirst for knowledge and the means to quench it. However, socialization was still a problem. I preferred to be in the company of my books. I was mainstream and my mother arranged play dates with my classmates in hopes of getting me to mingle with other children my age. She enrolled me in theatre classes, writing classes and dance classes so that I could learn a new skill and be exposed to different people. Her goal was to make me independent. Later, in standard 8, I was able to move schools as a boarder. By now, I had gotten a cochlear implant and my hearing and speech improved. I had decided that I would enter my teens with a bang. I orchestrated my 13th birthday myself. It was a Harry Potter themed birthday party. I DIY'd the decor, I designed the cake, the cupcakes, and the games. Destiny, however, decided that I could do with a little more bling. In June, I was diagnosed with cancer, BCAAL. My parents decided that the best option would be to move to Vail. in order to treat me at CMC. 2 years of chemotherapy were immediately prescribed for me, and I started my long, arduous treatment. I was diagnosed with cancer, but I was still living, and I was excited for that. The opportunity to live. My school, Hebron, was extremely supportive at that time and continued sending work for me. I started studying from home before it was a thing. I had started baking a little while before my diagnosis, and during my stay in Bello, I improved by leaps and bounds on my baking. My family, who were foodies, probably realized 4 o'clock at that time. After 9 months of intense chemotherapy, I was told I could go home to Coimbatore. The treatment wasn't complete yet, the doctor said, but I could go home. I would still have to travel to Bello every month for a chemo for the next year and a half. I went back to school in Uti, physical school. I just had to wear a mask to keep myself safe. I had to take care to eat fresh, cooked food and drink cold water only. I had to keep myself away from crowded places such as the mall. Other than that, I could do whatever I wanted. So I did. I had always wanted to write a book. I did that. I have now published a book of poetry, and one of my stories have been published in an anthology by Scholastic. I read all the books I wanted to. I did all the artwork I wanted to do. I cooked up a storm in the kitchen. I tried out various recipes from different cultures. I wanted to attend the Head UN conference at Hyderabad. So I donned a mask and went. It was one of the most nuanced experiences of my life. Meeting Harvard students and making friends with them, attending conferences, meeting delegates from various countries, and getting to experience a model of the UN was stimulating. Sometimes I wanted to go to the mall, so we planned our visit accordingly. We went on weekdays in the mornings when we knew the mall would be less crowded. If I wanted to go out to eat at a hotel, we did the same thing. We went to hotels we trusted on weekdays. I believe we are like marionettes. There are strings attached to our backs, into the strings, controlled by something, someone, or destiny, whoever, whatever it is. It is fate that we go along with the puppeteer's touch. If we resist, it is going to be difficult. The cancer in my body was just another part of me. I couldn't do anything about it. I didn't even know why my cells mutated. If I couldn't do anything about it, what was the point in me sitting and mulling over it and allowing myself to miss opportunities to live the day? So I lived the day. I realized we were like an ant on a clothesline, a thin red line, if you will. We could be trampled on any time, meaning we could die anytime. So I chose to say hey more and charge through every day. Today my cancer is back, but I can't sit and mull over it. I haven't even read Nikolai Gogol. I so desperately want to read him. I have a multitude of stories to tell. If I sit and mull over all what destiny has thrown against